A whopping $75 million. That's how much former President Trump's Political Action Committee raised in the first half of the year, partly through fundraising pitches like this one. Facebook ads that read, "We need you to join the fight to secure our elections." How much of that $75 million went to any of the ballot reviews and so-called audits that Trump praises? Zero. The Post reporting instead, the Save America Leadership PAC, which has few limits on how it can spend its money, has paid for some of the former president's travel, legal costs, and staff, along with other expenses. Trump will continue to stoke the big lie that's been so profitable for him and his PAC with a speech tomorrow in Arizona, home to the audit that is so central to keeping baseless election fraud conspiracies alive. The event is billed as a, quote, rally to protect our elections. Joining our conversation, Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press and an MSNBC political analyst. Eugene Robinson is back with us. Eugene, I just want you to react to the Washington Post report. I mean, $75 million, that's an incredible sum of money, much less an incredible sum of money to raise off a lie. It feels like the presidency may be over, but the grift goes on.
Well, Alicia, I'm not hearing shock in your voice, and I'm not seeing it on your face, and I'm certainly not seeing either on John's face. The grift goes on. Who was surprised that Donald Trump raised all that money and is using it himself, is using it selfishly? The most selfish person we've ever seen in our public life, and it's all about the money. And so you might feel sorry for the people who are giving all this money, thinking that it is going to fight this imaginary voter fraud, when in fact it's going to pay for Trump's staff and his travel and whatever else. But they should know by now that that's what would inevitably happen. And that's who he is.
Right. What I feel, Eugene, is worried for our democracy, and I know that you share that concern. Jonathan, I want to talk about the latest Brennan Center report because, as I mentioned, the big lie, good for Trump's bottom line, serious consequences for voters and for our democracy. 18 states have passed 30 laws curbing ballot access, 6 states shortening the window to apply for a mail-in ballot, 4 curbing the use of drop boxes, 2 states cutting back on early voting hours. Of course, none of these states have produced any evidence of the election fraud that led to these voting restrictions. My question, Jonathan, are they past even trying to justify why they're doing this?
It sure seems that way. For a lot of these states, these are measures the Republicans wanted to put in that place a long time ago. And what happened was Trump's big lie gave them a catalyst. They suddenly had an excuse to do so, to restrict access to the ballot in a number of places in those states. And there are others that are considering similar measures. And this is, for many Democrats, the existential threat to our democracy and, frankly, to their ability to win elections. If their voters are predominantly the ones who are disenfranchised, it's going to be very hard to win in states where the margins are so close. And that's why there's been mounting pressure on President Biden to do more here. I was with him last week in Philadelphia when he gave his voting rights speech, and it was a good speech, well delivered, very powerful, one of his best he's delivered since office. But it made no mention of the filibuster, none at all. And this week at the CNN at the town hall, he said that he supported the talking filibuster, but there really wasn't any specifics in terms of whether or not he would lobby Democrats to do that, to make it harder, to make it harder for Republicans to stop federal legislation that would protect voting rights, which many Democrats believe is the only way to do so. And instead, the message from the White House is they want to out-organize, do voter turnout, make sure their voters, voting registrations can't be challenged, to rely on legal battles, to rely on the Department of Justice. And that's all well and good, many Democrats say and activists say, but not enough. They say there's no substitute for federal legislation, and they need the president to step up.
Right. Eugene, your sense of where that resistance is coming from on the part of the president?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether he's just deliberately trying to play it soft and then it plans to come in with more force and directness. I tend to suspect not, because time is a wasting as these measures get passed, and now we're going to be in the election year cycle before you know it, and then it becomes utterly impossible, probably. And so I think I don't like to resign myself to bad outcomes, but I'm almost resigned to the fact that Democrats are going to be fighting uphill in the next election and maybe the next couple of elections. If they had a bigger majority in the Senate, they could do something about the filibuster.
Well, I mean,
but they can't now.
It's especially interesting, Jonathan, because at the same time that you have that astute analysis from Eugene, you also have Republicans actually trying to expand the field on which they're playing. So the Post is reporting that support is growing in the Texas GOP for an audit of the election results, but only in big counties, which mostly went for Biden. I mean, didn't Trump win Texas? What is the point here?
Eugene's analysis is always astute, first and foremost. And you're right, they're running up the score. They see a moment here where there's the will of the people, at least the will of their constituents, to challenge votes, to restrict access to the ballot. And you're right, Trump won Texas and won fairly handily, but that could change. For a while now, we've been hearing how the Democratic shift in that state, the second largest, in the country, could eventually favor Democrats. Certainly, I think most analysts believe we're still a couple cycles from that, but it could accelerate if there is more influx of, let's say, people from California moving to Texas. Now, Democrats would have to do a better job of turning out Latino voters in Texas than they did last time around. But that still is something that's a deep concern for Republicans because they know that if they lose Texas and California is already in the Democratic column, it's going to be very hard to ever be elected president again. And that is what's fueling a lot of this in these states, some more obvious swing states like Florida, Georgia, et cetera, where they're trying to just hold on to power there. And they've got the state legislatures to do it. And right now, they don't really see any consequences, that there is no federal legislation on the horizon, and there's nothing that Democrats in these states can do except for leave and go to Washington, D.C. That's a temporary solution, not a permanent one.
Right. I mean, Eugene, of course, Jonathan is right to underscore demographic change in a place like Texas, especially because it's a big part of this story. The audit, of course, would be in larger counties than went for Biden. And if you look at the demographics of those counties, really gets at the dark racist aspects of the big lie, doesn't it? This idea that there was mass voter fraud, not just generally, but specifically among voters of color.
Yeah, right. It's there's massive voter fraud where Black and brown people vote and where white people vote. Everything was fine, no problem. I mean, it's absolutely racist. Let's just get that out there. These sorts of voting restrictions. I mean, this is a new load of voting restrictions that we're getting, likely to get. In the short term, they can tick people off. In the short term, they can help Democrats drive turnout. And so in that sense, Republicans should be careful what they wish for. But in the long term, that's what I worry about, that initial sort of anger and resistance that you might get from Democrats in the next election cycle or maybe the next one after that eventually could fade. And then you're left in a situation where Democrats are more permanently disadvantaged.
Right, and to say nothing of the ways in which they are structurally and fundamentally restructuring elections. Jonathan, I do want to ask you, ahead of his visit to Arizona, Trump issued a statement attacking an Arizona state senator who said he was embarrassed by the audit and endorsing his challenger. What is the message he's sending here? Is he telling Republicans you have to be all in on election fraud fantasies or you don't belong?
Trump also put out a statement today bashing the new nickname for Cleveland's Major League Baseball team. So he's been prolific. But yeah, that's what he is. He is targeting Republicans who are not fully devoted to him. We know how much loyalty matters to the former president. That it's a one-way street often, as he's been quick to cast aside those who disappoint him. But he is demanding pure fealty from other Republicans, and he has been not shy in attacking those, whether they're federal officials or in this case local ones, who aren't doing that. And right now, the litmus test in the Republican Party is whether or not you go along with the big lie. That is what is fueling the GOP as it heads to 2022 and tries to reclaim the majority in the House, even if perhaps not in the Senate, and 2024, whether or not Trump runs or not. This is undergirding everything they're doing, suggesting that Trump was robbed and that the voter rolls are to be dealt with suspicion and that they're trying to take the ballots away. There's no evidence, it can't be underscored enough, no evidence of widespread voter fraud, none. But this is what they're doing. Trump demands it, and there are very few Republicans, very few, who are willing to defy it.
John, I have to read from State Senator Paul Boyer's response to Trump. He said, had Trump built the wall like he promised, perhaps he could have prevented the 40,000 hashtag bamboo ballots from being imported into Arizona. And if he hadn't started an insurrection in D.C. and gotten kicked out of here, I could have responded directly to him. So there's that.